My mother tore up the letter. My father walked out of the room and never brought it up again. My college classmates called me a traitor. All because, after 44 years as a practicing Jew, I said a two-line phrase and changed my eternity. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't a phase. It was something no academic title, no synagogue, no theological debate could silence inside me. A quiet question that only found an answer when I heard the Adhan for the first time. My name is David Elbaz. I'm 46 years old and was born in Tel Aviv, Israel, into a traditional Jewish family where faith, identity, and history walked hand in hand. Today, I live in the United States, and I've decided to share my story not to stir controversy, but to give voice to what many feel but don't have the courage to admit, that sometimes the truth lies where we least expect to find it. Before I continue, drop a comment telling me which country you're watching this video from. And if this story has already stirred something inside you, subscribe, because what I'm about to share might answer questions you've carried for years. I grew up where faith was the foundation of identity. My home was a small apartment in Tel Aviv, where every object seemed to hold a story tied to our people. The Hanukkah menorah, the mezuzah on the door, the Hebrew prayer books. Everything pointed to who we were, Jews. My mother recited blessings like she breathed. My father took me to synagogue every Saturday and would say, "This is where the world makes sense." But even with all that, something in me never quite fit. Since childhood, I asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. If we're the chosen people, why do we suffer so much? If God is so close, why does he seem so far away? These questions didn't come from rebellion. They came from a sincere desire to understand. But the answers almost always came with a heavy silence, or with reprimands disguised as doctrine. You don't question tradition, David. Just trust. In my teens, I dove into studies with intensity. I was an obsessive student, passionate about history, especially Middle Eastern history. While most kids my age debated politics or soccer, I devoured books about civilizations, empires, and ancient religions. My goal was simple: understand the world, to maybe, just maybe, understand myself. In college, I deepened my studies in the field of comparative religious history. I read the Torah as a source, but also the Talmud, the Gospel, and yes, the Quran, albeit with some distance. I had an intellectual curiosity, but never a spiritual connection to other traditions. At least that's what I told myself. Still, certain passages unsettled me. Some rituals felt automatic, almost mechanical. I felt I was repeating gestures my grandparents once performed, but without experiencing the connection they claimed to have with the eternal. And with every holiday, every communal prayer, the question grew louder. Is this all that faith is? Repetition? Social belonging? Or is there something more? I never dared say it out loud. In Israel, religion isn't just belief, it's national identity, politics, family heritage. Questioning too much can make you seem like an enemy, even in your own home. So I carried on, with the kippah on my head and emptiness in my heart. A Jew by birth, by culture, by tradition, but growing ever more distant from God. Until one day, during a research trip, what was merely academic curiosity turned into a spiritual earthquake. And it all started with a sound. Until one day, during a research trip, what was merely academic curiosity turned into a spiritual earthquake. And it all started with a sound. It was in Istanbul. I had been invited to an international congress on the Ottoman Empire. As a Middle Eastern history specialist, it was a long-time dream. I stayed in a modest hotel near the Fatih district and walked daily to the National Archives, surrounded by mosques, Islamic schools, and religious bookstores. What to others was just scenery became a constant whisper to me. My purpose there was purely academic, I was gathering data on 19th century administrative reforms, but the more I studied, the more I encountered something unexpected, a living, silent, dense presence. As if the faith of those centuries still lingered in the yellowed papers, the calligraphic strokes, the scent of the manuscripts. It wasn't mystical, it was something deeper. It felt like history was calling me inside. One ordinary afternoon, I went out for lunch after hours of reading documents. I passed by the Suleimani Mosque, and at that moment, as the sun began to set, I heard the adhan, the call to prayer. I had heard it before on previous trips, but never like that. The muezzin's voice rose from the minaret, as if tearing through the sky. Cars stopped, birds seemed to go silent, and so did I. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, surrounded by people who no longer noticed that call, while I, a historian, felt pulled into something no book had ever explained. My whole body got chills, and a phrase hit me without warning: "You're not here by accident." That night back at the hotel, I opened my laptop but couldn't type a thing. The reports were forgotten. Instead, I opened the browser and typed Quran in English, PDF. I downloaded the file, opened to Surah 1, Al-Fatiha. I read it, reread it. I felt an unsettling calm. For the first time in years, I wanted to pray. I was still David, still Jewish, still an academic. But something inside me had begun to shift. And when a Muslim colleague handed me a physical copy of the Quran saying, "Read this, not as a historian, but as a soul," I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. When that colleague gave me the Quran, with a calm smile and no pressure, I thanked him out of politeness. But inside, something had already started to fall apart. And it wasn't because of theological arguments or complex doctrines. It was because of that sound, that call, that moment. I couldn't forget the adhan. In the days that followed, even unintentionally, I started rearranging my routine to be near a mosque whenever prayer time approached. I didn't go in. I just stopped, listened, closed my eyes and let that sound pass through my chest like a wave that doesn't hurt, but wakes you. And every time the same feeling returned, a silence inside the noise, a calling inside the routine, an echo that whispered, "You always knew." It wasn't just the melody, it was the intention behind it. That voice rising from the minarets wasn't calling for a performance, it was calling to God. No instruments, no show, just the pure sound of submission. Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah. One day I decided to go in. I entered alone without telling anyone. It was a small mosque near Istanbul University. I took off my shoes, sat quietly at the back, and simply observed. Men came in silently. Some smiled, others looked like they carried the weight of the world. But all of them, without exception, left their burdens at the door. When the prayer began, I saw bodies bow, foreheads touch the floor, voices whisper verses. It was a choreography of the soul. I watched and cried, but it wasn't sadness. It was a kind of relief. For the first time after years of being the academic, the rational one, the heir of tradition, I allowed myself to feel, not analyze, not question, just feel. That night, back at the hotel, I opened the Quran Ahmed had given me. I began to read, not as a historian, but as someone searching for an answer reason could no longer provide. And as the words began to take shape, what was once just a sound became a direction that slowly began to change my destiny. That night, after visiting the mosque, something changed in the way I opened the Quran. Until then, it was academic reading. Now, it was a search. And with each verse, it felt like the words knew me better than I knew myself. It wasn't just an ancient text anymore. It was an intimate, direct, living conversation. Right in the first few pages, I came across stories I had known since childhood. Abraham, Moses, Joseph, Mary, Jesus, but something felt different. They weren't trapped in the past. They breathed. They were presented not as distant figures, but as living examples of faith, struggle, and total surrender to God. It was as if God was saying, I was with them, and I'm with you too. One night I reached Surah Al-Baqarah, and there, among many verses, one in particular stopped me in my tracks. Allah guides whom He wills to the straight path. In that moment, I let the book fall into my lap. The tears came without warning. I hadn't cried like that in years. It wasn't emotion over the beauty of the text. It was the feeling of being found. Because I never told anyone, but behind my intellectual rigidity there was a hidden pain, the fear of being spiritually lost. And now, with just one sentence, I felt like God had answered me. The words I read that night broke me down. Everything I thought I controlled, my knowledge, my reputation, my rational convictions, was dismantled by the simple power of truth. And that truth didn't force me to believe. It simply invited me to surrender. I kept reading in the following days. I read late at night when the city was asleep. I read in cafes, in libraries, in the silence between lectures. The Quran didn't shout. It whispered. And with each whisper, I felt as though God was saying, "You're coming home." Until then, I hadn't told anyone. It was a secret between me and the Creator, but it was no longer possible to pretend nothing was happening. My soul was in motion. And when I realized that every time I was in distress, my heart began to pray using the words of the Quran, I knew I wasn't the same anymore. The truth is, even after reading so much, I still didn't know what it would be like to be inside the faith. Not just facing it like a spectator. I had visited a mosque in Istanbul as an observer, but that was different. Now something in me wanted more than to just watch. I wanted to take part. I wanted to feel what it was like to stand before God the way I had read about in the Quran, with no intermediaries, no mask, no inherited rituals, just me and Him. The words came out firm, but with a trembling voice. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulallah. Translation, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is His messenger. In that moment, it felt like the air changed density. Something invisible yet heavy and sweet fell over me, and before I could even realize it, my eyes filled with tears. It wasn't ordinary emotion, it was liberation. It felt like years of weight, doubt, and internal noise all went silent at once. My heart felt clean and free. The Imam embraced me. Then came others. One by one, men I had never seen before said to me, "Welcome, brother." I had lost a family, and now I had gained another. It didn't erase the pain, but it healed the soul. That night I returned home in silence. The world looked the same, but I was no longer the same. My religion now had a name, my soul, a direction, and my past, though not denied, was finally reconciled with the truth. I didn't become Muslim to deny who I had been. I became Muslim because I finally understood who I was before God. Today, I'm still David Elbaz. I still carry my last name, my story, my origin. But now I carry something that can't be found on a passport or in a resume. The awareness that I was found by God. I'm Muslim. I performed the 5 daily prayers. I fasted my first Ramadan with tears in my eyes, grateful for every date broken with my hands. I wear a beard as a sign of respect, not as a symbol of rupture, and every time I place my forehead on the ground, I remember the first time I heard the adhan, and how that silent sound still guides me from within. My mother still doesn't understand everything, but she says she's never seen me so calm. My father started calling me again, still with short sentences, but with the tenderness only a father can give. And my university students, once skeptical, now listen more attentively, maybe because more than just a historian, they now see a man finally speaking with truth. I never stopped loving my roots. On the contrary, it was Islam that taught me to honor family, prophets, history. But now, all of that makes sense within a greater purpose, a God who is one, present, near, not just heard in prayers, but felt in the silence. I'm still a professor, still study, still ask questions, but now with a heart at peace. Because I found something years of degrees never gave me: direction, meaning, submission without fear, faith without performance. This story isn't about losing a religion, it's about finding the Creator. And knowing that, even after so long walking in the dark, God never stopped seeing me.